Call me a madman because I somehow managed to bring back the Blood Mage tech. Now for those of you who don't know, there was a term called chain casting, and that recently got taken out in the 1.05 update, probably one of the worst updates I've seen for Elden Ring, but that's besides the point. What I've done is I've tweaked my Blood Mage build from my last video. If you want to see that, there's a link, but the changes were substantial enough to talk about it in a video. So to start us off, I've completely rehashed the old build. We are now a 65-24 split on Faith and Arcane respectively, and we now use the Albinaric Staff. This staff can be found at Volcano Manor. The staff is going to be scaling off of our Arcane, which is really good for us because not only is our Bloodthorn sorcery going to be doing more bleed buildup, but since we're sinking so much points into Arcane, this also helps our weapons as well, making the build a lot more efficient than my previous one. For the weapons, we have scrapped the Scavenger Sword, although it's still a pretty good sword you can use, but we have two Reduvias that you can use as backup weapons. You can max out these weapons. I just ran out of Ancient Somber Stones. I'm poor now. You can also have the Ujigatana as well. I really love this with the Bloody Slash Ash of War, because apparently Ashes of War actually scale off of stats, which I wasn't aware of, and Bloody Slash ironically scales off of our Arcane. I've easily hit people for 1,000 plus, so this is a very good Ash of War for that purpose, not to mention that it causes bleed buildup, and it's also infused with Occult as well to make the scaling better. And finally we have the Ripple Blade. Now the Ripple Axe is actually pretty good for building any status condition. Because the weapon scales off of Arcane, any status ailment you're going to put on the weapon is going to be scaling off of your Arcane stat as well. And Arcane makes status build up a lot quicker, so you can easily use Bleed Grease and bleed people out in 3 hits. Wild Strikes is also very good on this weapon because even though we can't change the Ash of War, if you can time when the bleed procs to be on that small hit before you do either the light or heavy attack follow-up after that, I believe it's a true combo, and most people will actually just die, so very good tip to have. Speaking of tips, what you're seeing on the screen right now is the main fashion for the build. Again, the helmet is going to be raising our Arcane by 3 points, and we're going to be using the Briar's Gauntlets so that we can have an extra 5% boost to our Thorn sorcery spells. You can always stack more, but it's always fashion over function for me. Plus, I feel like higher Arcane is going to be better than higher Thorn sorcery damage. The Talismans really haven't changed much. The only change I would say is to put Blood Exaltation on it, because we actually proc bleed enough now, so we'll be able to benefit from the attack buff. We also have Bleed Grease for the Ripple Blade. It's not needed, but it's also unfortunate that the Ripple Blade doesn't have innate bleed scaling, so we will have to use this to put bleed on it. You don't have to use the weapon if you don't want to, but it will help a lot. Something I thought I'd mention is if you want more Arcane, because we are at 62 Arcane, you can use the Silver Tier Mask to get an extra 8, so you'll put your Arcane at 70, which will help with your stats build up a lot, but personally I find the mask kinda ugly, so I decided with the Mask of Confidence, which will still put us at 65 Arcane. You can also use the Albinaric Hood, which will give you 4 extra Arcane, which is kinda crazy because you get 4 custom emojis if you subscribe to the channel, so if you're looking to support me, this would be the best way to do that. Now for the Showcase. Now if you watched my previous video, this won't be much different from the first playstyle, it's just been tweaked, although the second playstyle from that video can still be done fairly effectively, so this is more of an updated version. To start off, chain casting is not nearly as strong as it used to be. People say that you can just jump and do it, and while that is true, there is a new timing added to it, so you have to actually time when you do the chain cast, and if you switch too early or too late, you'll end up just doing Briars of Sin in the middle of the field like a fool and just die for it. Sometimes people get caught by it anyway if you mess up. What I suggest to make this more consistent is when you press Glintstone Dart or Carrion Slicer, whichever one you're using to start the chain cast, wait a little bit while you're in the air during your jump, and then switch to Briars of Sin, and then is when you're going to want to spam the cast button. That has been the most consistent option for me, but even then sometimes you might miss the chain cast, so it is a little experimental. Now to talk about the playstyle. What's cool is that each weapon that I have listed here has a purpose and a use. For example, the Reduvia can be used to either chip people away with bleed to build up the meter, or bleed them out outright. For weapons with one of the highest bleed rates in the game, when you pair 2 of them and you do the backstep attack, which you can see here on the screen, you can see how effective this can be. I literally bled her out in 2 hits and I brought the whole match back. So these weapons are very good even though they're daggers. You shouldn't sleep on them. The Eleanor Pole Blade will be another one that you can use on the builds. You will have to raise your dexterity to 16, and you can wear the Veteran's Prosthesis Talisman to get your dexterity to 21 because that's the requirement. This is a pretty decent one as well, although I wouldn't fit it on the build long term. It was just more of like a weapon that I wanted to try out because I didn't want to use the Rivers of Blood, so I just wanted to use this one as an alternative. The Uchigatana is another solid weapon that I like to use. You can either have the Bloody Slash to hit people for 1000 plus, or you can have Blood Tax, which I've been playing around with. It isn't the best Ash of War in the world, but it does rejuvenate some of your health, so that's nice if you're trying to run like a vampire regen, blood-esque build. That's kind of up your alley. But overall, pretty decent Ash of War as well. It does cause bleeding as well on the Blood Tax, but the Uchigatana is going to be a very consistent katana that you can use. But the main star of the show, I feel, is the Ripple Blade. Now, I talked about it a little bit before, but you will need bleed grease to make this weapon really shine with the blood loss buildup. But when you have bleed grease on this, people get bled out in like 2 to 3 hits in my experience. And when Wild Strikes is paired with it as well, when you use the weapon art and you can trade with people will not realize how quickly bleed is building up on them, and sometimes they'll just die. For this build, you can either be aggressive or passive. You can be aggressive with the Ripple Blade when your buff is active, because that will apply bleed very quickly, and you can do the Rise of Sin Chaincast tech. Or if you want to play more of a slow, passive way, you can use the Reduvia, and you can use the weapon art on it, so you can kind of chip people for blood from afar, and then use your katana to clean up the kill. Some notes about the build is that I actually found out that Rise of Sin lasts for really long. Not only that, but the hitbox is lingering for so long that sometimes people will think that the move is over and jump into you, and they'll realize that it's still active and they'll just get bled out. So that's a good tip you can use if you want to kind of throw your enemies off. I also noticed that Rise of Sin, because the chain casting timing is a little difficult, sometimes you may have to start with the first phase attack and not the second phase, and because of that, some people might roll out of the bleed damage on the third phase, which is where most of the blood buildup and damage is at, which is really unfortunate. And if that happens, honestly, you might just have to switch to the Reduvias to try and get more bleed buildup again, but it really sucks when this happens, and it's just really unfortunate. That will be it from me, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the new Blood Mage. I really did my best to try and make this work again, so if you liked the video, liking and subscribing, very appreciated, very cool of you. For those of you who made it to the end, I will be hosting an event next week, so keep an eye out for that. I'm going to post a community poll, so you guys can vote on what I do, and we will go from there. See you guys later, be good, peace, love, and light.